It's a trick question. All of these images are wrong. These images aren't real, and they never were, yet many of us have striking memories of these images exactly as they appear here. Memories that are apparently false. These memories have a few interesting properties. They're vivid, they're widely shared, and we tend to be very confident that they are accurate. In fact, when asked to draw these images from memory, many of us reproduce these exact errors. Unless, of course, these memories aren't false. Maybe these are genuine memories of a world that no longer exists. So what's actually going on here? Metaphysical trickery? Evidence of the paranormal? Genuine conspiracy? Or are we suffering from some kind of consistent, widespread delusion? Put on your tinfoil hats. We're getting to the bottom of this problem that involves a very particular kind of false memory. This is the Mandela effect. On December 5th, 2013, the South African civil rights leader Nelson Mandela died. And thousands of people all over the world suddenly came to the same shocking realization, that Nelson Mandela had been alive. It turned out that many of us had been under the impression that Nelson Mandela had died in a South African prison in the 1980s. But of course this wasn't true. In fact, after his release from prison, he became the first president of post-apartheid South Africa. But the memories of his death in prison were so vivid and so consistent that it was difficult to ignore. This event never occurred. So where did these memories come from? Paranormal researcher Fiona Broom was the first to describe this, a phenomenon she called the Mandela effect. The Mandela effect has been reported for events. Nelson Mandela is alive? Spellings, Berenstain, common images. The Fruit of the Loom logo absolutely used to have a cornucopia, right? And even physical features on real animals. Have orcas always had this gray splotch on their backs? These shared false experiences have been widely interpreted as evidence of alternate dimensions or fractured timelines. Memories of another world. Of course, scientists have another story. Wilma Bainbridge and Deepa Prasad are cognitive psychologists at the University of Chicago who study visual perception and memory. And they're determined to get to the bottom of what causes the Mandela effect. They want to know why so many of us misremember iconic images like the Monopoly Man, Pikachu, and the Volkswagen logo. As it turns out, there may not be a single explanation. The truth may turn out to be a little complicated. If you feel like you have a pretty good memory, you're probably right. Studies have shown that we are very good at remembering things like images and scenes. A 2008 study of visual memory had participants look at images of 2,500 objects over the course of 5.5 hours. They found that participants could later recognize up to 92% of these objects. In a more recent study, participants studied photos of 30 scenes and later drew as much as they could in as much detail as they could from memory. These drawings were then judged by thousands of observers who found they could very reliably match the drawings to the original photos. So our memories in general seem to be extremely accurate and preserve detail even over huge and complex sets of images. Let's do our own experiment. You're about to see a list of words. Try to remember as many words as you can, but don't write anything down. That's cheating. Got it? We'll see how many of these words you remember 1 minute from now. Human memory is actually notoriously unreliable. But wait, didn't I just say that we have amazing memories? Well, our memories may seem accurate, but they're actually mostly cobbled together reconstructions. We may be good at storing and recovering details of images and events, but we're also prone to a very specific kind of error, producing false memories. Memories of things we never experienced.
This movie never happened.
And to answer the $1 million question, did I do Shazam? No. Did I look like I do Shazam? Yes. Did I do Shazam? No.
I mean, unfortunately, Sinbad is pretty unequivocal. This movie never happened.
Even our most vivid memories can sometimes turn out to be completely fictitious. A study conducted at Duke University collected recollections about 9/11 from students the day following the event on September 12, 2001. They were interviewed again 1 week, 6 weeks, and 32 weeks later. What the researchers found was that the consistency of these extremely vivid memories faded over time at exactly the same rate as ordinary memories. But the belief in their accuracy stayed the same. So while vivid flashbulb memories fade away exactly like mundane memories do, our confidence, our certainty of these memories' validity doesn't. Test time. Remember that list of words you saw earlier? Do your best to remember as many of those words as you can. Which of these words were in that list? It's another trick question. None of these words were on the list. If you said chair, you've just experienced a false memory. We tend to falsely remember the word chair because the list contains so many chair-like words. Because the words are all related to a certain theme, it can generate the false impression that we actually saw the word that embodies that theme. This becomes a huge problem in the criminal justice system. Even information presented in questions can alter the memories of a witness. A question like, was the suspect a tall man, can bias a witness to falsely remember seeing a tall man at the scene of a crime. We are very vulnerable to this kind of memory error. And it doesn't just apply to words. We are just as susceptible to false visual memories. Studies have found that when we are shown images of scenes with missing features, a beach scene with a missing umbrella or beach ball, we are very likely to falsely remember those missing details, even though they never existed. Our minds seem to simply fill in the gaps. We can even get these kind of errors when we try to remember extremely common or familiar images. Let's take an object that we should all be extremely familiar with, something we've seen thousands of times, a penny. Which of these pennies is accurate? If you find this difficult, you're not alone. Many studies have found that our memories of even simple everyday objects and images can be surprisingly susceptible to memory error. This has been found with stamps, the Apple logo, even the letter G. Amazingly, in a 2018 study, only a single participant was able to accurately recreate a loop tail letter G, the kind you see in printed books. Despite seeing potentially millions of examples of this letter in our everyday lives, it's still incredibly hard for us to recreate from memory. Why is this so hard? The fact that we are so bad at this actually tells us a lot about how our memories are stored. We don't tend to store perfect records of what we experience. We're not walking hard drives. We organize our memories into abstract categories called schemas. Storing memories this way is kind of like data compression. Computers can compress images by removing redundant or predictable pixel information and then recreating those missing pixels later. This way, it doesn't have to store information about every pixel in an image. For example, if I have a picture with a lot of black pixels, do I really need to store the value of every single one? Can't I just remember that all the pixels are black? That's so much easier. And our brains do something very similar with our memories, removing redundant information and then filling it in later using our knowledge about the world. In other words, using schemas. Why bother storing information that matches what I generally know to be true about the world? So we can remember lots of details, but sometimes we skip the details and fill them in later with generic information from schemas. Does our susceptibility to this kind of memory error explain the Mandela effect? Memory schemas may account for some of these errors. The Monopoly man kinda seems like he should have a monocle, right? After all, Mr. Peanut does. And it fits our stereotype of a rich man in the early 20th century. But it doesn't explain everything, like the fact that we forget about the brake in the Volkswagen logo, or C-3PO's silver leg. Another possible explanation is attention. Maybe we don't pay enough attention to certain features of these images, which causes us to misremember those details. Wilma Bainbridge and Deepa Prasad tested this possibility by measuring attention as study participants scanned around an image using a mouse. They found that misremembered features were looked at just as much as other areas of the pictures, so this doesn't seem to explain why those features were misremembered. What about our prior experience? Maybe our memories are accurate after all. No, I'm not saying that I actually have memories from another dimension. I just mean, I'm pretty sure I've seen pictures of Pikachu with a black tip on his tail. Maybe I'm correctly remembering something that I've actually seen. Prasad and Bainbridge thought of this too. They scraped the internet for every example they could find of these iconic images. They did find some examples of images with incorrect features, but not enough to explain why so many of us remember them incorrectly. In fact, those incorrect images were most likely themselves a product of the Mandela effect. Images generated by people who misremembered the details of the images and reproduced or altered them in accordance with their false memory. This leaves us with a strange possibility. Maybe there is something inherent about these images that makes them hard to remember. Some mysterious quality that fuzzes them in our memory. This may sound far-fetched, but Wilma Bainbridge previously conducted a study on face perception and found that some faces are simply harder to remember than others, although there's still not a single clear reason for this difference. We know certain images of faces, objects, and scenes are difficult to remember, but we don't know why. And this may turn out to be a primary factor driving the memory errors behind the Mandela effect. So why do we have false memories of common, iconic images like Curious George or the Fruit of the Loom logo? It's possible that there is something about these images in particular that just induces false memories. So what's the deal with the Mandela effect? Are we really remembering things from another world? Or are we living in a split timeline? Are we victims of some kind of massive memory erasing conspiracy? I don't know. It seems pretty far-fetched. I guess we're just gonna have to accept that the human mind is messy, and that we're really prone to remembering things that never existed.
This has been a Penguinati production. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos. If you'd like to support the channel, links are in the description.